Welcome back to Movie Recap Brothers. Today I will show you a sci-fi, romance, drama film from 2016, called Passengers. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. The interstellar spaceship Avalon can be seen traveling through space on its way to Homestead 2, a new colonized world for humans. All of its quarters are deserted, and the vessel is currently on autopilot. The crew members as well as 5,000 other passengers are all in hibernation. Suddenly, the ship experiences some turbulence that causes its shields to weaken. Power is sent to the main shield to protect the ship, but the ship is in a collision course with a giant asteroid. The asteroid collides with the ship, causing malfunctions to occur. The ship begins its self-repair process, but a hibernation pod has been activated. The passenger that awakens is Jim Preston, a mechanical engineer. His pod opens up and an automated system greets him with his awakening, telling him that he's spent 120 years in space and the ship is only 3 months away from Homestead 2. He's been informed that he'll be able to spend that time relaxing and enjoying the ship's amenities. Prior to his arrival on the planet, Jim receives information concerning his ID band, his cabin, and the principal activities he will participate in. He gets ready, exits his cabin, and walks into an automated lesson made for a whole learning group, both excited and terrified to meet the individuals aboard the ship. As the hologram discusses the situation on Earth, Jim becomes concerned. It advises him to save his inquiries until the end of the lesson, but Jim can't stop himself from wondering why he's the only one there. He understands that the hologram is unable to respond to him and sets out to find other individuals. He makes his way to the ship's main concourse. There is no one else there, but an automated information desk offers assistance. When Jim requests to speak with a real person, he is sent to speak with a steward, but when he discovers that no one is available, he requests to speak with the captain. Even though he doesn't have permission to enter the bridge, he notices that none of the main crew members are awake. Jim eventually makes his way to the observatory, where he discovers that the ship is actually 90 years away from Homestead 2. He realizes he awoke too soon and rushes back to the concourse, where he sends a message to Earth, asking what he should do because he doesn't know how to return to hibernation. The communication system informs him that the overpriced call to Earth will take 55 years to receive a response. Jim is heartbroken. He walks around until he comes across the ship's bar, where he notices another person. Something odd seems to be going on with him while he's talking to the bartender. Jim realizes he's an android when he goes to get him a drink. Jim wants to get more information from him, but he can't even explain to the android how he can be there ahead of time. The next day, Jim wakes up in his cabin and goes to the cantina, where he quickly realizes that most of the items on the menu are only available to gold-class passengers. He gets himself a cup of plain coffee and tries to figure out how to repair his hibernation chamber. After gathering all of the necessary tools, he manages to turn it on and lies down inside the pod. However, nothing happens. He then decides to use the tools he discovered to gain access to the crew's hibernation chambers. That, too, does not work. Small malfunctions occur throughout the ship. Jim keeps going back to the bar, mostly to talk to Arthur. The android gives him some advice, which persuades him to break into one of the gold class rooms and have some fun on the ship. Jim investigates all of the restaurants, games, and entertainment systems. But as time passes, he grows increasingly dissatisfied with being alone. He gets drunk one day and wanders around the hibernation pods until he comes across an airlock with spacesuits designed for spacewalks. Jim dons a suit and goes to the airlock, where he pushes a lever and then a button to open the airlock door. He's taken aback by the view once he's stepped outside the ship. He is the only conscious human being present at that point in time. Jim lets go of the magnets on his boots and floats in space, devastated. He returns inside, removes the suit and returns to the airlock without it. He pulls the lever, ready to end it all, but then changes his mind, runs back inside, and slips on a bottle. Jim stands up and is immediately drawn to Aurora, a woman in one of the pods. He searches the directory for her files and listens to her passenger interview, becoming smitten with her. He was later seen sitting next to her pod, still listening to her interviews. Back in the bar, he's reading some of her work and discussing it with Arthur. Jim continues to think about her and begins to consider waking her up as well. He discusses it with the android, but he doesn't understand the quandary. Jim initially decides against it, but as time passes, he can't let it go. Until he changes his mind one day. He goes to her pod and successfully activates it. He hides and returns to his room as she awakens and goes through the same process he did. Later, he goes to the main concourse, hoping to find her. And there she is, still as perplexed as he was a year ago. Jim informs her that they are the only ones awake and drives her to the observatory. Then he informs her that he is unable to contact the crew or the ship's main commands. Aurora panics and wishes to return to her pod. When they arrive, Jim informs her that there is no special equipment on the ship that can assist them in returning to hibernation, effectively telling her that they are stranded. They return to the concourse, and he advises her to rest because she has just emerged from hibernation. Jim returns to the bar, feeling bad about what he did. He requests that Arthur not tell Aurora that he was the one who woke her up. Aurora awakens the next day. She returns to the concourse and inquires about the hibernation pods at the automated information desk. Jim joins her there, and the two of them go to get breakfast. As they leave, there is a problem with the information desk. Aurora realizes in the cantina that Jim has been eating the same breakfast for over a year and orders him one of the gold-class menus. She searches the infirmary, then research documents, before arriving at the crew's hibernation quarters and attempting to break the doors open. More flaws are discovered throughout the ship by Jim. She goes to the cantina to interview Jim because she thinks his story will be interesting. She inquires as to why he came to the colony. Jim responds with company slogans at first, but then goes on to say that he hopes that in the new world, he can be somebody and build a life. Later, they arrive at the observatory, where Aurora finally reveals why she is there. She, unlike the other passengers on board, has a round-trip ticket. Her plan was to travel to Homestead 2, live there for a year, and then return to Earth, becoming the first journalist to do so and write the greatest story ever written. Aurora gradually gives up on finding a solution to their current predicament, and Jim devises a way to cheer her up. He takes her out to dance, to the movies, and to the basketball court. Finally, he brings her to the bar to meet Arthur. She unwinds for a moment before recalling their situation. Jim is left alone with the android, regretting what he's done to her. The next thing we know, he's tinkering with something, and Aurora walks into the observatory to find a miniature of the Chrysler building he built for her. They go on a date at the bar later on. They eat dinner and tell each other stories about their lives. She informs him that her father died when she was a teen. After dinner, Jim transports Aurora to the airlock, where they don their spacesuits. They embark on a spacewalk together. Jim has finally found someone with whom he can share his incredible experience. Jim turns off the magnets in their boots, and they float in space together. Soon after, they begin to live as a couple. The ship passes by a red giant one day, and they go to the observatory to see it. Aurora's birthday is later that night, so they celebrate in one of the ship's many restaurants and then the bar. While Aurora is in the bar chatting with Arthur, Jim goes to the restroom to prepare the ring he made for her. The android informs Aurora that Jim purposefully woke her up, unaware that he was still to keep that a secret. Suddenly, Jim reappears, and she confronts him in disbelief. She flees, enraged and terrified. The next day, he runs into her in the cantina, but the moment he speaks, she flees. Aurora is in desperate need. She goes over to Jim's cabin one night, punching and kicking him and threatening to kill him. Jim attempts to apologize and explain his actions to her over the comm because she continues to avoid him. He tells her he has fallen in love with her, but Aurora is unconcerned. She is unable to forgive him for taking her life. Another malfunction occurs one night while Jim is in his cabin. The ship is experiencing a critical error, and the main command is shutting down. Later, he enters the elevator, which malfunctions. Aurora enters the main concourse and notices Jim has planted a tree there. She then goes to the cantina, where the food dispensary is also broken. Suddenly, they both hear the deck chief's voice over the comms asking who planted the tree. They both dash into the concourse, where they see Gus Mancuso standing in front of Jim's tree. They introduce themselves and explain the situation to the chief. He's perplexed as to how 3 pods could fail. Mancuso takes them to the bridge, where he discovers that something is wrong with the ship, but the information on the systems must be manually checked. When they leave the bridge, a robot nearly falls on their heads, and the two of them inform Mancuso that malfunctions are becoming more common throughout the ship. He assures them that this will not happen as he demonstrates how to collect the data. Jim joins Mancuso as he checks on the pods. He's discovered what happened to Aurora's pod. The deck chief regards Jim's actions to be terrible. Later, he's at the bridge, reviewing the data he's gathered, when Aurora joins him. They talk about what happened with her pod, but he tells her he can't help her. Jim enters the room, carrying the 16th broken robot. Mancuso feels sick from hibernation, so he goes to bed, but as he walks out, he coughs up blood. Aurora can't sleep that night, so she goes swimming. Suddenly, there is a loss of gravity throughout the ship, and she begins to drown as the water from the pool moves with her. The gravity drive is reset, and she barely escapes alive. They both run into each other while looking for Mancuso. They're all back on the bridge, slowly figuring out what's going on with the ship. Mancuso discovers that something happened 2 years ago, causing a major system to fail. They must determine and repair the source of the failure, as the entire ship is attempting to pick up the slack. If they do not repair it, the entire ship will be stranded. They go to investigate the problem, but Mancuso passes out, so Jim and Aurora take him to the hospital. He's dying, and there are no treatments that can stop it or make it last any longer. Sometime later, the three of them meet in the observatory, and Mancuso hands Jim his ID bracelet, instructs them to repair the ship, and then dies. Suddenly, the lights turn an unsettling red, and the ship begins to shake. Jim informs Aurora that he requires her assistance, and the two sprint toward engineering. They eventually make it to engineering and begin looking for the problem. They find it in the power plant, and Aurora is sucked in as they open the hatch. The asteroid has caused a hull breach in that area. Jim is sucked in as well, but he holds onto the hatch as it closes in on him. He eventually gets sucked in as well, but they quickly close the gap. Jim immediately notices that there is more than one breach in the hull after resolving that issue. They track the meteor's path and discover that it collided with the reactor control computer. Jim believes he can locate replacement parts for it. They locate and replace the part, but the process of venting the reactor continues to fail. They do it manually, but it fails once more. Jim realizes that he must open the vent door from the outside of the ship in order to cool the reactor. Both of them go to the airlock, and as he's about to leave, he hands Aurora Mancuso's bracelet to her because he might not return. She assists him with the suit and tells him to return as he walks into the airlock because she can't live on the ship without him. Aurora returns to the reactor, where the temperature has reached critical levels. As Jim approaches the vent from the outside and notices the door, a bolt from the reactor propels into her arm. The temperature rises in the reactor room as he tries to open the vent door by bypassing it. He soon realizes that he must manually hold the door open so that the reactor can vent, and he informs Aurora of this. She opposes the plan, but he goes ahead with it and instructs her to vent the reactor. She doesn't want him to die, and they argue, but he tells her that they need to save the others, so she vents the reactor. The process is successful, but the fumes from the reactor push Jim away, causing his tether to snap. The pressure in his suit is also decreasing. He tells Aurora what happened, and she rushes to get to another suit and bring him in. He apologizes to her once more. She dresses up and flies out to find him, but her tether is too short. She's being dragged back, but she suddenly grabs his tether and pulls him in. Aurora drags Jim into the hospital, only to discover that he is already dead. She uses Mancuso's bracelet to circumvent medical procedures and resuscitate him. Jim is revived by the medical pod, which does all of the work automatically. Aurora accepts his apology. Aurora later repairs Arthur, and they give Mancuso a proper space burial. Jim brings her to the infirmary and informs her that he has discovered a way to use the medical pod as a hibernation pod. He instructs her to enter the pod and spend the rest of the journey inside. But, as it is later revealed, she declines and decides to remain awake on the ship with him. Jim eventually proposes to her, and they spend the rest of their lives on the ship. The Avalon arrives on Homestead 288 years later. The crew awakens to find the ship in an unexpected state. Aurora leaves them a message, telling them about her and Jim's time on the ship while the rest of them slept. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications for more movies like this. Thanks for watching and take care.